Good morning, everyone. It is Janine, the Pricing Lady, and you are live with the Pricing Lady. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm really happy to have you here. I work with small business owners to help them know what to charge their customers, how to communicate their values so they can charge the right prices and close more deals. I'm very excited this morning to have a very special guest with me, Jules Wyman. Hello, Jules. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Jules, why don't we go ahead and start out with you introducing yourself to everyone.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jules Wyman, as Janine's already said. I'm a confidence coach, author and speaker that is based in the UK, but work with clients all over the world. And yeah, I would say about 50-60% of my business is one-to-one coaching, and the rest of it is fun spread around speaking and training. And my ambition is to help people understand and dispel the myths, really, that are around confidence so that more people can access and understand it for themselves.
Right. Fantastic. So Jules and we met last year, and welcome again. Welcome to those of you who are watching live. Be sure to say hello to us in the comments below and let us know if you can hear us well enough. But Jules and I met last year at a conference in London, and we were both eagerly attending each other's workshops, if I remember correctly. And we had a nice chat also because, pricing and confidence do go hand in hand. But before we dig into that, Jules, why don't you tell us a little bit more about confidence in general and what it is that we're really talking about here?
So in brief, to me, I refer to confidence as being a bit of a gateway drug, in the sense that it's a great conversation starter to help things unfold for other people so that they can get to understand what confidence is. Because as I say, there's a lot of myths around it. And I think one of the first things that I want people to understand is the root derivation of the word confidence. And that comes from two Latin words, which is confidere. And those two words mean with trust. So actually, when you're talking about confidence, what you're talking about is trust.
Trust.
And I looked at this with a number of different languages, and they all go back to the same thing. And what's important then for me is when you're talking about self-confidence, which most people are in relation to working on themselves, is therefore you're talking about self-trust. But that doesn't mean that you're then trusting yourself to get it right, be perfect. It's having a go, and that's where most people fall down because they're worried about failing or being judged or getting it wrong and all of those sorts of sides of things. So to me, that's the in with the conversation is looking at it in that aspect.
And where does this sort of lack of, you said it's not really lack of trust, but it's this, well, in a sense it is, but where does this come from? What are the roots of this?
I think a great deal of it is to do with, I think it's both nature and nurture. And there's lots of arguments because we do have confidence genes, that there's research that's proven that, and there's various levels. But again, it's what's the environment that you'll grow up in. Okay. And I think that as kids, one of the first things that we want to know that we're safe and well. Right. And, but we don't have an understanding that those big people that are looking after us can be doing other things, and therefore they don't come when we expect them to. So say, for example, I can remember the amount of times that I laid at night and, being very small and crying out for my mum usually. Right. And, it took her a long time to come. Now, for a child, I could have made that mean all sorts of things. And then I can't trust those big people, or I'm not good enough because they didn't come when I asked them to. But I may not have had I didn't have the awareness to understand that those big people may have been doing other stuff. They may be asleep. They may have been enjoying each other's company. There's all these other things that may have been going on. That means that's why they don't come at our beck and call. But we just don't have the intelligence to be able, and the experience to be able to understand it in that way. So we make up all sorts of things. So it is based in that, but it isn't about blaming the environment or blaming the parents. It's to do with our interpretation of it.
Right. So one of my colleagues, he always explains it as, I'm here Mom isn't, therefore it's my fault and there's something wrong with me. We kind of make these wild connections that are usually not terribly accurate.
Well, I don't think they're accurate at all. And I think it's understanding that the way that the thinking mind works is that it's always going, what does this mean about me? What does this mean about me?
Right.
So it's always making whatever happens, good or bad, however you want to label it, it's always making it mean something about itself. And then it creates that as an identity.
Okay. So I'm curious because we want to talk about this. And of course, that's why people are here. We want to talk about this in the context of running a business and then eventually pricing. So how does this, I imagine, so you work with all different kinds of people, not just small business owners and entrepreneurs, but how does this come into play when it comes to starting your own business?
Oh, well, I think that actually threads in beautifully to what I was just saying around that identification. Because I think very often what we do is whether you're employed or whether you are self-employed, in whatever capacity, it could be a small business, it could be a huge multinational. I think what we end up doing very often is we identify what's going on with us, so we make it about us. And if you think about the languaging that we use around pricing, it's the same languaging we use around ourselves. So we talk about, this product is worth X amount, or this service value is da da da. Well, we use the same languaging around us. We say, I need to think about my self-worth, or I need to think about my self-value. And it's like, hang on, that's the same languaging. So those two things have got intertwined. Right. So very often what happens and why people struggling with whether it's negotiating a deal, whether it's selling their product or selling their service, I think very often what they've done is because they've wedded this up, even if it's not their own product, they've made it so much about them that when they win, they're like, oh, yes, I'm brilliant, I'm amazing. But then when they don't, it's the other end of the scale and things become, quite messy and complicated.
Yes. I mean, it's true. I mean, I have to confess myself that, I like it when I get things right. Is that a bad thing? And
none of this stuff is bad.
Okay.
But equally, none of it is good. It's about recognizing the impact that it's having on us. And, this is something I've learned. I'm coming up this year to be my 15th year as a coach professionally. And did I know this stuff at the beginning? Hell no.
True confession time
in relation to this? Absolutely. So, I am not sitting here going, I was born knowing all of this, because that's crap. We learn by our own mistakes. And this is why I understand this. You've got it's not wrong. I love it when I'm going to be starting with a new client and a new client is just saying yes, and I've got this new project on, or that's happened. That's great, because I'm like, oh, there's that. For me, that's the creativity. Right. The thing to be aware of is not to be making it that means that I'm good because I've got that deal. Because if we're doing that, then what's going to be happening is that's when that roller coaster. Right. We feel like, yeah, look at me, I've won that deal. Oh no, I haven't had any work for however long, and that happens, and that's when that can impact our behaviours and impact the substances we consume and how we interact with others. So that's where it can be quite damaging, really. Right.
So how do you celebrate the good stuff? And you can also mourn the things that don't go the way that you want without it affecting your confidence level, or can you?
Yeah. So to me, it's about. I've got a client who's Irish, and she says, "What's for you won't go by you." And I think it's what's for you won't go by you. And I really like that. Love that as a saying. Right. And I'm very much of I work on not having attachment to a particular outcome. So I work on having it's kind of like not having expectation. My only expectation is that life provides. That's it. That's my expectation, is life provides me with whatever I need. Right. But that may not be what I want, but it gives me what I need. So for me, then that and I am hands up, this is still a work in progress. Right. But I do notice, especially now, that when I'm having a conversation with a client, and they've been asking around, they want to have a conversation about a particular new project. I'm thinking about some conversations that have happened in the last few weeks. I'm not attached in the way that I used to be as to whether they say yes or no.
Right.
So if they say yes, that's exciting because I get to be creative and share some of this amazing information that I've learned. And I love that. If they say no, that's nothing to do with me.
Right.
You know, it's in some sense, it's a bit like dating, says the lady who.
You know, it's funny. I've said the same thing.
But it is.
But it is.
It's all about relationships, right? You know, if somebody says no, I think quite often people get caught up with, oh, well, they've rejected me. No, they haven't. They've rejected the service or the product.
Right.
And that's where it's so important to extricate yourself from that identification of this is who I am. It's like, no, it's not.
I think that
you, but that's not who you are.
Right. No, I think that's a super important point, that a lot of it is around the expectations that we put on these things. And, you know, for me, I tell my clients all the time, you know, not every client is a great client. And not every client is a client that's good for right now. Yeah. Or that you're good for right now. And so, you know, if somebody says no, excuse me, it's not about you necessarily personally. It's just that now's not the right time, and that's okay. Yeah, that's really
exactly. And I think that's where you can, if you've got your own personal worth attached to your service, or attached to your job role, or attached to your salary income, or then you're going to be on a quite frankly, a shitty roller coaster.
Right.
Because all of that is out of your control. You have some influence, but you've got no control over it. So therefore, it's just going to be a nightmare of a journey. Whereas when you separate those two out, it goes back to what we were saying about, what am I making this mean about me? We don't just do that as kids. That behavior continues on. That's how the thinking mind works. So if a prospect says, actually, we're not going to go with you this time, it's like, okay, great. Would you mind giving me feedback? So that you can get clarity, because very often what the thinking mind does is it will say, what does that mean about me? Oh, well, that must mean I'm no good. I'm too expensive. That's the two things that people immediately go to. I'm no good and it's too expensive. It's got to be based on price. And I'm pretty sure that you've had a similar experience to me, that when you actually start to ask those questions, it's rarely to do with price.
It's usually priority. You know, I always tell people, and I saw this the first year I was doing my business, I noticed this in my own behavior, which is why it became so clear to me that a lot of the times I'll say it's too expensive or I can't afford it, but the money is actually sitting in the bank.
Right.
It's just that I'm not going to make that a priority for where that money goes right now. And that is a different thing. But as the purchaser, as the buyer, as a person looking for the product or the service, it's easier for me to say that's too expensive, because it shuts the conversation down.
Right. I think that's where we have to become very skilled, and I think if we're not defensive around, well, why do you want my thing? My thing is the best thing ever. We become really attached and quite forceful with that, then actually we're not going to get that information where we can learn. So it says, you know, oh, it's too expensive. In comparison to what? Right. You know, if price wasn't an issue, then would you go with this product? And if we still say no, okay, well, then why? I'd love to do that. If we can be open to that, then that's when we can learn and grow. But when we've got our identity attached with it, well, how dare you talk about my service like that, or how dare you? And it may not be as overt as that, but that energy is going to come through. And if that energy is going to come through, then that person's going to be like, oh God, I was thinking about using them in 2 months' time, but actually I'm not going to now. Right. We need to let that go, create that separation, so that it gives us more of a freedom and an opportunity to do with that. I don't know if that will make sense.
Yeah, it does. So I think if I can rephrase or recap kind of what you've said, is that the biggest sort of hiccup or challenge when it comes to confidence is detaching, your own worthiness from whatever it is you're doing, whether it be your job or your business or being a parent. Even, I mean, in any context,
Absolutely.
it's always about having this, I don't like the word detachment, but I like the word kind of the safe space. Right? Where you can operate and, these things aren't influencing how you're feeling about yourself in such a dramatic way.
Yeah, they just need to be unhooked. They
Right.
need to be separated, because
Right.
otherwise you're just going to be chasing something that you have no control or influence over, which is just not helpful.
Right. I think the other part of having confidence, and especially in your pricing, is also understanding what to do. So of course, when the first time we ride a bike, most of us are not very confident in what we're doing just because we haven't developed the skills for it, right? And so I think that there's also, if you've never gone on a job interview, it can be very daunting because you don't know what to expect. You don't know how to do it. You haven't, experience being asked questions, the whole thing. And so, I'd like to also make that a point that, if you don't understand what you're doing, then of course that's also going to affect how you feel about doing it.
I'd separate two things out, because there's a difference between confidence and competence. And what you're describing there is competency. So I can still have confidence in myself, trust myself to have a go in something that I've never done before.
Okay.
And again, that's a separation of those skills out,
right?
To give you that opportunity to go, okay, I've never been on a job interview before. It's a learning experience, so I'm going to trust myself to have a go, which doesn't mean I'm going to get it right. That means I'm going to have a go and I can learn from this.
Oh, interesting. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, because again, otherwise those two things are wedded. We go, like you're describing,
People don't start
with the expectation of, well, I have to know what I'm doing. Well, how can you know what you're doing? You've never done this before. That's just not helpful.
That's true. That's true. I never thought about it that way. I mean, because growing up in my family, and this is literally and figuratively, because if my dad saw us going into the pool one toe at a time, he'd pick us up and throw us in. Right. So we weren't allowed to test the waters. And I do mean literally and figuratively. Yeah. He literally would just chuck us in the pool. And so, I grew up in an environment where we were expected to do things even if they felt uncomfortable.
But I think, and I'm pretty sure, I may be getting this wrong, but I'm sort of like 99% sure I'm right, that the woman who set up Spanx, her family, and I think it was her dad actually, had the same thing, that at the end of every day around the dinner table, the conversation would be, tell me something where you really messed up today, where you failed, and let's have a chat about it. And they got just as excited about that, because then that made it okay. It made it okay. And I think that very often we make that mistake and we kind of shove it under there. So let's hope no one sees it, rather than, and it's not, I don't think that we have to walk around with it all, oh, and by the way, and then I did this, and then I messed up there, and then but I do think that we need to recognize that we are human, and we don't come out of the womb knowing how to do these negotiations. We don't know how to come in, go and for a job interview, or ask for a salary raise, or we have to learn how to do these things, and that's okay. Right. By learning to do these things, that's where we grow, and that's what's going to help us. So I think that's fantastic that, I'm glad that your dad was at the side just in case there was some flailing going on, but what a great way to learn, though.
Excellent. So I want to say hello to everybody who's joining us. We've had quite a few people popping in and out over the last almost 20 minutes. So thank you for joining and watching us, and for your wonderful comments. If anybody has questions, we're actually running out of time, but if you do have questions, be sure and pop them in the comments, and Jules and I will get to them after the show. So Jules, before we wrap this up, I have a couple other questions for you. Okay. What is the one thing that you want people to leave our conversation with, to leave this episode with today?
The worth of your product or your service is not your self-worth.
Okay. I hope everybody heard that. Write it down, keep it in there, that, in order to, if you're battling with this topic, then you really need to work on separating those two. Jules, if people want to get in touch with you and find out more about how to work on their own self-confidence, where can they go to find out more?
Heading to my website is the best place. So it's juleswyman.com, as it says so brilliantly on the screen today. Thank you for my glamorous assistant. Head there. And there's also there a 7 Keys of Confidence, which you can find on any of the pages, which is a free download. And when you fill in your email, tick the box underneath, then you can stay informed. And if you want to know more about one-to-one coaching with me, then please do get in touch. And I do a Facebook Live every Monday night as well on my page, which you can find all the details on my website as well.
Super. Excellent. So yes, go ahead and go over to juleswyman.com. We'll also put that in the comments later. So if you don't want to have to type it in, you can just click on the link. One other thing I like to ask people before we go is, as you've developed your business over the years, where have you struggled the most when it comes to pricing?
I think exactly what I've just been talking about, but I think because I got I didn't come, whereas I know that you've made your journey from the corporate world into running your own business, I didn't have that journey. So I worked in the wonderful world of show business. So coming from show business into this, I didn't know that any of this stuff existed. I didn't know networking existed, or conferencing, or personal development courses. I didn't know any of that. That's like a completely different world. So, and I didn't have any confidence, which is why is something that I worked on for myself.
Right.
So for me, that has been my biggest journey, because to me, when somebody said, "Oh, could you coach me?" I was like, "Oh yes, just give me £5. I'd be so grateful." And it's like,
you were like begging them to pay you.
Well, near the beginning, I think I was paying them, quite frankly. It was that kind of way around. So I think that that's been probably one of the biggest. And I think, and it's interesting actually, because I've had people approach me recently, and I've been giving them my pricing structure for the programs and everything. And I noticed now that I don't flinch. I don't flinch at all when I say, "Oh, it'll be that much."
Yes.
And just gauging with, okay, well, how much are people charging for this in the marketplace, and having a look and going, okay, well, I am pitching that around about what other people are, and that works for me as well as the market. It's like, oh, okay. And I think, and it goes back to what we were saying about the Irish client of what's for you won't go by you. Right. Is that if that person says they can't afford you, or that's what they that's not their priority, that's not where they put their money at this moment in time, it's just be okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
When the time is right.
When you're ready to work with me.
Right, exactly. I'm here. So I love that. I think that's great. I always find it amazing. All the people, pretty much everybody I've had on the show also struggled with this topic at the beginning of their business. So I think it's important for people to know, one, that it's not just them. Yeah. Absolutely. And two, that it is possible to take steps to move beyond it. So thank you, Jules, so much for being on the show with me today. That was great fun. I learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience did as well.
I've had a great time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And everyone, if you have questions about pricing, you can go ahead and book a call with me, a discovery call. We can take a look at how I might be able to help you. And since we talked about it, I thought I'd bring up one other thing, which I don't have the link here. Oh, no, I don't. Also, if you go to my website, you have a checklist for what to do when your customer says that's too expensive, which will help you get started on solving that problem as well, and getting the right frame of mind when it comes to getting those comments and pushback from your clients. So thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you here with us today. I look forward to seeing you next week when I have my next guest on. And as always, everyone, until next time, enjoy pricing, everyone.
Take care.